So that was the first part of this presentation. This presentation is going to be broken down into a series of digestible parts. So I've made my first point, which is that we need to appreciate that Islam has spiritual and legal dimensions, and that the legal is necessary. It's the container in which we fill the spirit. Meaning we establish this legal framework of Islam, we establish the salah as it should be, we establish wudu as it should be, and then that becomes a container or a framework in which we pour the spirituality. So we need both. We need the legal framework, and we need to fill it with the spiritual realities. So the next topic in this discussion for today is the central role of a concept called tazkiyah. Tazkiyah is a term that you may have heard of. We're going to talk about it in a little detail now. So first of all, the Quranic term for spiritual purification and growth is tazkiyah. You know that terms in the Arabic language are derived from base letters or root letters, and the root letters carry meaning. So the root letters for tazkiyah essentially carry the meaning of two major things. Number one, purification, and number two, growth. And this isn't a physical purification. Tahara is the term that's used for physical purification. This is a spiritual purification. So the term tazkiyah refers to a spiritual purification that leads to growth. More specifically, it implies that you remove something in order to allow for the growth. More specifically, it implies that you remove something in order to allow for the growth. For example, classically in the Arabic language, it's used for clearing a field in order to allow for the crops to grow. So if you imagine that example, let's say there's a plot of land and we desire to grow crops to their fullest extent, one of the things that we have to do is we have to clear the land and purify the space. Now, as we clear the land and ready the space, the crops will then naturally grow. So this term tazkiyah has that implication in it. To remove things, to remove impurities, allowing for spiritual purification and growth. So this is essentially what we mean by tazkiyah. And of course, this is the Quranic term for purification, for spiritual purification and growth. Tazkiyah was a core function of the Prophet ﷺ. And I think that's something that we have to appreciate. Tazkiyah was a core function of the Prophet ﷺ. If you said, give me a list of, the few handful on a single hand, list for me the key core functions of the Prophet ﷺ's mission, we would say that tazkiyah is one of them. Now, how can we make that claim? Because in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly indicates the key features of the mission of the Prophet ﷺ and lists tazkiyah as number 2. For example, in this ayah, كَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا فِيكُمْ رَسُولًا, just as we sent you a messenger, minkum, from amongst you. So here we're being told, the community is being told at that time, and then more globally, the entire ummah is being told that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent a messenger from amongst them. What are his characteristics, or what are the features of this messenger? يَتْلُو عَلَيْكُمْ آيَاتِنَا. Number 1, he recites upon you our ayat. So this is in reference to the Quran. The first function of the Messenger ﷺ was to recite the ayat of Quran to the community of the Sahaba. وَيُزَكِّيكُمْ وَيُزَكِّيكُمْ, and he spiritually purifies you. This is the second function of the Messenger. Now look, this word tazkiyah, وَيُزَكِّيكُمْ, this is where tazkiyah comes from. And he spiritually purifies you. This is the second role of the Messenger. وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ, and he teaches you the book and the wisdom. Here the book refers to the Quran, so the Prophet ﷺ elucidates the Quran and exemplifies its characteristics. وَالْحِكْمَةِ, the hikmah is the sunnah, according to most scholars. So the Prophet ﷺ is teaching the kitab and the sunnah. وَيُعَلِّمُكُم مَّا لَمْ تَكُونُوا تَعْلَمُونَ, and the fourth function, he teaches you that which you did not know. So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing 4 functions of the Prophet ﷺ, and one The second listed, one of them, the second listed, is tazkiyah. So again, highlighting how important it is for individuals to purify themselves spiritually so that they can grow and develop in their deen. Now this tazkiyah has stages. The very entry stage to tazkiyah is called the Shahada. Everybody knows the Shahada, obviously. But you could say that that's the very first step in tazkiyah. Now why is the Shahada the first step in tazkiyah? Because what happens in the Shahada is a person removes the impurity of other than Allah. A person removes the impurity of other than Allah, which then allows for the growth of Islam in their heart. Does that make sense? So this is the first step. First step in tazkiyah is the Shahada, where a person removes the impurity of kufr and plants the seed of the oneness of Allah in their heart, and Islam is then allowed to grow. So this is the very first step. But it's not the only step. There's numerous other steps along the way in which a person continues to achieve purity, spiritual purity, which allows for growth. For example, we also have a responsibility to purify ourselves of sin and blameworthy traits. As a Muslim progresses in their deen, they need to purify themselves of sin. They should not be sinning. They should avoid sin. They should learn, first they should learn what are the sins, and then they should learn how to avoid the sins. And they should learn that when they perform a sin, they should make tawbah or istighfar if a sin occurs. So this is another thing that needs to be removed. We need to remove sin, allowing for Islam to reach its maximum potential. Similarly, we need to remove blameworthy traits: envy, greed, avarice, pride. These are all things that we have to weed from this garden. Now we've got this garden of Islam. We have to weed these things away. Backbiting, excessive speech, etc. All of these things, it takes a gardener to weed away all of these things from a person's life so that their Islam can grow to its full and complete fruition. So the first and initial steps is going to be Shahada of tazkiyah. But it's going to progress along the way to eliminating sin and additionally eliminating blameworthy traits. Just to highlight this principle, everyone has heard this before, but we'll repeat it. The Prophet ﷺ said, "The one with a seed of arrogance in their heart will not enter Jannah." The one with a seed of arrogance in their heart will not enter Jannah. We're not talking about an arrogant heart. We're talking about a seed, one weed. One weed. You can think about it in the gardening example that I've given. One weed of pride or arrogance in a person's heart will be sufficient to preclude them from directly entering Jannah. So what does this mean? It means that when we read a statement of this nature, or when we hear a statement of this nature, it's not entertainment, it's something very serious in which we need to go back and say, okay, I need to review my garden. I need to see, do I have arrogance? And if so, I need to weed that out to allow my Islam to grow. So this is another example of a type of tazkiyah. So the general principle for this section is that tazkiyah has steps, and that every step of tazkiyah opens a space for a believer's Islam to grow. Tazkiyah has steps, and every step of tazkiyah opens space for a believer's Islam to grow. And this is something that all of us should be particular about. So we all need to seek tazkiyah in our lives.